like Life from the Loam, or if he somehow gets Thespian Stage or Dark Depths in the graveyard, he'd love to put it on one of those cards.
Yeah, certainly.
Looks like Surgical on Punishing Fire is going to happen. We'll get a look at David's hand now. Maze of Ith, Gamble, Forest, Life from the Loam, and a fetch land. So there's actually a lot to like here. Between Gamble and Loam, David can find Thespian Stage.
Yeah, very likely that Jim would have to use that Force of Will on that Gamble.
Suppose he has Deathrite in play, he can try to use it on Life from the Loam. Or he could.
Well, it won't be active on David's following turn.
Right. Okay, so yeah, you would have to hit Gamble with it. All Punishing Fires exiled here. David has them surgically extracted from his deck. Jim's hand, though, Deathrite Shaman, Fetch Land, Tireless Tracker, Force of Will. No blue card for the Force of Will. Now, he hasn't used his Jace yet, so he could use Jace to try to brainstorm into a blue card there. And he may need it because of the line you were just mentioning.
Right.
It looks like that's what he's going to do. Jace will draw him 3 and put 2 back. And Tarmogoyf.
So for as much as we refer to Tarmogoyf as a blue card, it does not pitch to Force of Will, but he did find a 5th land. If he passes on casting the Deathrite Shaman, he can leave up hard casting Force.
So if Jim wants a counter spell, his play has to be land go. Looks like Jim's having none of that. He's going to go with Tireless Tracker, use Misty Rainforest to make a clue. He'll get 2 clues here, but he is shields down right now.
Does get to fetch off the Rainforest. He can potentially crack the clue into blue card.
Okay.
It's an aggressive line, but it has some play to it.
Right, gets 2 clues, 1 off the Misty Rainforest and 1 off the Underground Sea. You're right, he can crack clue into blue card. The play we're talking about here is if David gambles for Thespian Stage. Jim's gonna need an answer. We go back over to David Long. Crop rotation is the draw. Well, how about Thespian Stage is just happening?
Yes.
With that draw, now Jim would need 2 counter spells. And now once Depth Stage is on David's side of the board, looking at Jim's list, can he interact with the 2020? Can he maybe block it and then Jace unsummon it? Does he have a way? You know, he just needs 1 turn.
Jim does have a couple Baleful Strix in his deck.
End step, Jim cracks a clue. Chrome Mox drawn, Brainstorm drawn.
There's a couple Pithing Needles in the sideboard if he's able to get those now.
Now, David didn't actually gamble there. He just played a land and passed. He's hoping to try to end step crop rotate. However, Jim has that covered with Force of Will, and now he has Brainstorm to go with. Draws another card, Nimble Mongoose.
It's a 1-of out of the sideboard for the Zenith package.
It's a weird sideboard card.
You can't Punishing Fire it.
Now, Jim does like it, actually, here. Uses Jace to Fate Seal David. Keeps the card on top, plays a land, gets a clue. Looks like we're going to play either that Deathrite. No? How about that Nimble Mongoose? Both, Mongoose and Deathrite. Hand is Force plus blue card. David's going to try to crop rotate. This is lethal unless Jim uses the Force of Will, so I think he'll have to.
Yeah. Jim has drawn the Chrome Mox that he is very unhappy to be playing in this deck, playing 2 copies. Said they were pretty bad all weekend.
But Jim down to 1 card. This is a opening for David Long.
David is under a lot of pressure. He has to assemble that 2020 very quickly. That Tracker's up to a 5/4. The Mongoose, it looks like Threshold is active. At least 7 cards showing there for Jim.
Right. So if he gambles for Thespian Stage, plays it, says go, and then makes a turn, the next turn he's actually dead before it hits.
Does have a Maze of Ith in hand, so he can stem the bleeding. That'll buy him some time.
A gamble from David Long. I guess I could find like an exploration, perhaps. Try to just loam, put the maze into play, loam through a lot of his deck. There's a lot of ways this goes wrong.
He doesn't have enough mana to really take advantage of that.
Gambles for stage and discard stage. Looks like we're heading to a third game. And this is going to be a fast game 3 for the 2 players. There was some interesting playing going on there and different openings. David ended up getting his crop rotation snagged by Brainstorm. If he had main phased it, I actually think he gets away with it, which he didn't know.
Jim did have 4 cards in hand.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard to really. He also doesn't necessarily know Jim's 75. Doesn't know if there's a wasteland available, and he can't go for the 20/20 right away.
Right. So he'd have to crop rotate main phase. I mean, one thing about the Sultai control deck that Jim Davis has is that it's kind of low on blue cards to pitch to force.
Yeah.
You look at the list. We have
a lot of green ones.
4 Deathrite, 3 Tarmogoyf, 1 Scavenging Ooze, 3 Green Sun Zenith, a Jite, 3 Abrupt Decay. There's a lot of non-blue cards in this list.
Yes. Couple Chrome Mox.
Yeah, I actually do like Chrome Mox in this matchup. Land certainly isn't playing fair on making one mana per turn.
Yeah, mana acceleration certainly matters here. Having it not come in the form of a creature, that helps a lot in the face of Tabernacle. We saw Jim did have Surgical Extraction in post sideboard. Possibly has some number of Pithing Needle as well. Something like Thespian Stage. Long sideboard doesn't look like he has very much that plays here.
Yeah, we did see the Surgical Extractions come in for Jim Davis. Now, Jim Davis, he was your Players Champion back in 2015. Competed in 2016 as well. Jacob Baugh, the winner of our Season 3 Invitational, this, as a result, got his artwork on a token of his choice. Chose the energy token as he won the tournament with Aetherworks Marvel. That's still available right now at Star City Games. We've been giving it away during Season 1. You can get it with entry to any of our opens here or classics here in Season 1, or by placing an order from the Star City Games store of at least $5. That's going to be available all the way through the end of June, so make sure you get your hands on these ones. Energy counters certainly seem like they're going to be a thing in Standard for the next couple years. With a card like Harness Lightning, I'd be very surprised if that stops seeing play.
I picked up 2 Jacob Baugh tokens this weekend.
All right. A break here by the players, so we are going to go back to the booth. Round clock is stopped for the 2 of them at 10:30. So as they head to a third game here, it seems like this is a match that's going to favor lands here.
It's certainly on the play that makes it more difficult for Jim to effectively leverage Deathrite Shaman. He does have relatively high access to it with the 3 Green Sun Zenith, so he can find it pretty reliably.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
But that's his most important card.
Right. We did see that game. No exploration or mana bond effect out of David Long, so he's playing a pretty honest game. No Mox Diamond. My concern, I guess, from Jim Davis' side is when he's on the draw. If David can land a way to make more than 1 mana on the first turn, Jim may just be too far behind.
Yep. And also, Jim only has a very small set of things that relevantly interact here. No wastelands, no stifles. It's really just the shamans interact with graveyard stuff, Force of Will for the small number of spells, but
he's got a Scavenging Ooze as well for graveyard cards.
Right. David frequently doesn't need to cast spell. Certainly if there's an exploration that comes down, you want to Force of Will that, but sometimes you can just play some lands.
Sure.
Maybe Punishing Fire your Deathrite Shaman. If you want to Force of Will that, I guess you can. And then just curve Dark Depths Thespian Stage, and that'll kill before Jim can. Jim's deck's just not that fast.
Yeah, there are Surgical Extractions and Pithing Needles in Jim's sideboard. Extraction's great. Needle, I guess, doesn't hit much. I mean, you can Needle Thespian Stage, which is fine. Well, you can actually, it's touchy, right? Because of Thespian Stage, when it copies something, actually it changes the name of the card.
You want to have that on turn 1.
Yeah, if you do it on right. If you can't top deck it, it's trickier. Out of David Long's sideboard, he is kind of, actually his build in general is a little retro. It's now we're seeing a lot of players play 1 copy of Ghost Quarter, still playing his sideboard has, we mentioned Sensei's Divining Tops in it, as opposed to what you normally see with Tireless Tracker.
The tops is something that you can use to protect your life from the loam from surgical extraction by just dredging it in response with that card draw. You know, previously, what people used to do that was cycle a land in response. It doesn't look like there's any cycling lands available in the deck, so the top plays that role.
3 copies of Engineered Explosives as well for David Long in the main, and that's fairly new. We don't normally see that many copies of the card in the main. I do like that, especially as cards like Sanctum Prelate start to see play. You know, that used to be an excellent matchup for lands. It's still pretty good, but certainly that card makes it closer, and Engineered Explosives helps there.
Yep, it's an answer to Deathrite Shaman as well.
All right, we're going to go back to the match here. Players are ready to start. 10 minutes for the third game. Both players, very experienced with their archetypes, are going to be able to turn up the speed on this one. Certainly no one wants a draw at this point.
Right.
So David on the play, cracking a fetch land. That looks like we're going to see some sort of exploration effect.
Yeah, that's about all he does on turn 1, so.
Yeah, well, sometimes, right, you could be like Mox Diamond, Loam, back 2 cards go.
Yeah.
It is going to be exploration. Does Jim have a force of will for it? He does not. Second land from David and a pass. This is exactly what I mentioned where I said where Jim doesn't want to be is behind an exploration.
Right. And that land was Wasteland for David.
One thing, if you haven't played with or against a lot of lands, their games can be very one-sided. Their good draws can beat just about anything. Draws that are good against them can be very good. Jim, Chrome Mox Imprinting Brainstorm into Brainstorm. Finds Deathrite Shaman, Surgical Extraction. These are his cards he wants, so there's a lot of play there.
The Chrome Mox means that he'll be able to maintain at least that blue mana through any number of wastelands.
Right.
What he wanted to find was a fetch land. He has 1 basic land in his deck. It's a snow-covered forest because Jim's a weirdo, but it still produces green and can't get wastelanded.
So a lot of good here from Jim's side. 2 mana on the first turn. Turn 1 Deathrite Shaman, Surgical Extraction in hand. There's a lot to like here.
Yeah, so now he just has 2 non-wastable mana sources, 3, the Deathrite Shaman as well.
Well, it looks like Engineer Explosives is in play for David, so he's going to loan back a fetch land. I wouldn't say necessarily that Chrome Mox is safe. Loam will get back the fetch land, and David will say go. He actually has no more lands here. He was probably, yeah,
He was hoping this Wasteland would be a little bit more effective.
Yeah, if there was a land for him to hit with Wasteland, he could have played the, I don't know, he actually still couldn't have made 2 land drops here. There's no way to sequence it. This is a window for Jim. Brainstorm again. I assume Surgical Extraction is going to have to come into play here for Loam, or Deathrite Shaman. Something's going to give.
Exiling Loam seems correct. I will say
I don't
that
want him
much.
to dredge it. Jim 2 lands back, picked up a copy of Green Sun Zenith and Jace the Mind Sculptor. So there's his win con if he can make his way to it. He is not very far on mana. Fetch land to complete the Brainstorm.
And this one cannot find a basic land.
He will surgically extract the Loams. That's gone. There's David's hand is 2 copies of Engineered Explosives and another Exploration.
So the second exploration he can at least cast after he uses the explosive to deal with a shaman, and then his exploration ends up getting some friendly fire, but he needs to find a way to produce more land drops.
This is one of those hands from David, which is, you know, it's on the play. You have an exploration and a loam. You certainly aren't mulliganing it, but it can be taken apart.
Yep.
His loams are now gone. And even if David cracks Engineering Explosives on 0, Jim will still have Jace the Mind Sculptor on the following turn.
Yeah, by making another land drop, he'd be able to do that.
Punishing Fire is the draw for David Long. It lets him answer. Mana-wise, he can either answer Deathrite Shaman or Chrome Mox, but not both. Has to decide which one's more valuable. And for Jim Davis, I think the clock is now his biggest enemy. It looks like he will be able to win this, to take control of this game. I don't know if he'll be able to win it in time. But Punishing Fire targets Deathrite Shaman. We're going to see Jace next turn. On this board, Jace should be good. Jim just bins Shaman. Suppose he could have exiled one of David's lands there.
Yeah, though.
They're going fast, though.
Life from the Loam has been exiled already.
Yeah. So actually, if Life from the Loam is an exiled, you want to keep lands in graveyard because Jim has more death rights. There's no real reason to exile them.
Yeah. David does have a sideboard Crucible of Worlds. Don't know if it came in here. That card's very vulnerable to Abrupt Decay.
And here is Jace, the Mind Sculptor from Jim. It's going to resolve. This is his win condition. Or certainly the way he's going, he now has control of the game. He's going to Fate Seal David. He knows that there's 2 Engineered Explosives. As long as EE on 4 doesn't happen, I don't...
So the top card was Mox Diamond, but David has no land to discard.
All right, so that's no good yet. Explosives on 0 looks to be the play for David. He's going to go ahead and hit that Mox, that Chrome Mox.
That's about all he can do.
Blows up the Chrome Mox. Brainstorm's gone. But Jim's got a Planeswalker. Second exploration from David Long. Without Life from the Loam, that doesn't matter. You know, he's not going to get 3 lands in his hand.
Again, it comes down to whether or not David has Crucible of Worlds in his deck.
Okay.
If Jim's already plus to Jace, it seems like that's the kind of card he'd be looking for to put on the bottom of David's deck. But it is a thing.
Fate Seal again from Jace. Looking at colored mana in David's deck, you might ask, is it possible for David to use that second Engineered Explosives? He's got a Taiga, Grove of the Burn Willows. Without a help of multiple, I guess he could like that spin stage some of Jim's lands to get like, additional colors.
Yeah.
But Scavenging Ooze from Jim Davis is going to make this a lot tougher. Even if David draws Crucibles, Graveyard's going to be gone. And 3:45 remaining. David draws a fetch land. And passes. Back over to Jim. Leovold, Tarmogoyf, Jace. Just probably wants to up his clock. He's got this one locked up.
Right.
He's going to go ahead and shuffle. Looks like there is something specific he's looking for.
Yeah, the Tarmogoyf seems like it would have been nice.
It depends whether it depends. It feels like Jim's playing a strategy, an untimed strategy, one where like the correct play here is probably to ship that. If you want to do, if we're in an untimed round, this is more, all he really needs is 1/2 drop to win the game.
Yeah, something like Force of Will backup would be nice.
Right. Now, we aren't playing untimed Magic, and it may be correct for Jim to give up some of his percentages to just increase the clock. I think he's fast enough anyway. He's Jace up to 9, plays Deathrite Shaman. Scavenging Ooze eats a creature. This should be fine. Long drops to 15.
Right.
And Engineered Explosives gone as well. Rishadan Port's the draw for David. Remember, his draws are being controlled by Jace. Well, kind of. He's got a fetch land. Cracks the fetch land here. For a Tropical Island. Okay, so there's a 3rd color.
Discarding the port to Mox Diamond means you can set Chalice on Explosives on 4.
Yeah, Mox Diamond, port. Does that resolve? Sure. Discards Rishadan Port. There we go. Blue, red, green, black. Engineered Explosives is on 4. It can answer Jace. There's another Jace in Jim's hand. This is just... So now Jim will stop face sealing. He will brainstorm with his Jace. A minute 30 remains.
Drew Pithing Needle, so you can just...
Needle Engineered Explosives.
If he so desires.
And that looks like where he's headed. He's going to go ahead and put the backup Jace back in the deck. Swing is for 3, long down to 11. Pithing Needle from Jim Davis will name Engineered Explosives. It's like another Deathrite Shaman from Jim. And the last card is a fetch land. So it plays out his entire hand. David's at 11, and he will say go. This should do it in 2 turns.
And Jim has plenty of instants and sorceries in his graveyard to get some activations on these shamans.
Yep, end step. David draws a card, says go. Looks like Jim's going to go toward one of his shamans. That'll knock David down to 9.
He's got some bad ones on the top of the deck. It is a time concern actually cracking the fetch land from here, though. You saw him there. He just drew the Jace. This is another spot where, in this spot, you would wish that he would shuffle that away, but
it's fine. Jace up to 11 to Fate Seal. Scavenging Ooze hits David down to 6, and that should do it. End step to Shaman plus Shaman main phase. With, even before time, it is Jim Davis on Sultai control, taking both sideboard games against Land's deck. He improves to 10 and 3 to keep his turn.